This is Grafeneck Castle in the Reutlingen district of southwestern Germany. In 1940, some 10,500 people were murdered here as part of the National Socialist forced euthanasia program, the killing of the mentally and physically challenged. This operation was known as T4, named after the street where it had its headquarters, Tiergartenstrasse 4 in Berlin. At the other end of the country we come to Pirna on the Elbe river. Above the town is the former fortress which in Napoleonic times was converted into a hospital. Here, in 1940 to 1941, at least 13,500 people were murdered in the same program. 4 other such locations existed at Hadamar, Bernburg, Hartheim and Brandenburg. The staff here learned how to mass murder, and many of them later went to Poland to mass murder Jews. However, in the time between the official closure of the program to kill the mentally and physically challenged and that of the mass murder of Jews in death camps, the staff from the T4 murder operation went to Minsk in the occupied Soviet Union. This was called the Osteinsatz, the Eastern Operation, and this is the subject of this presentation. On the 11th of December 1941, Adolf Hitler called a meeting of the Reichstag in order to declare war on the United States. As all of his cronies were in Berlin, they were asked to meet him the following day, where, at a meeting, they were informed of the Holocaust. I've done a video on this meeting, so I'm not going to talk about it more here, and if you're interested, then you can find a link below. In view of the announcement of the Holocaust, there were a number of meetings which led to the Wannsee Conference, which was the planning and coordination meeting to decide on how to organise the killing of the Jews of Europe, now that Hitler had decided to do it. That was on the 20th of January 1942. One of those meetings which led up to the Wannsee Conference was held 2 days after Hitler's announcement. On the 14th of December 1941, Himmler met with Victor Brack, organisational director of the T4 killing programme, and discussed what his appointments diary records as being euthanasia. Victor Brack had been in charge of the T4 euthanasia campaign, in which life, the Nazis considered not worthy of life, was taken. The victims were the mentally and physically handicapped. There are videos on this subject on this site, links once more are below. Most victims were killed by gas in facilities at Grafeneck, Hadamar, Bernburg, Hartheim, Pirna Sonnenstein and Brandenburg. This killing operation had started in October 1939. On the 24th of August 1941, Hitler gave his doctor Karl Brandt and Reichsleiter Philipp Wöhler verbal instructions to end Operation T4, although killings continued, albeit at a much slower pace. The last killing was done after the liberation of Germany. No one told the doctors to stop killing these people. The staff of the T4 program appear to have spent the autumn of 1941 in limbo, a sort of standby mode. However, in December 1941, some started to arrive here in Lublin, which was to become the control centre of what was to be known as Aktion Reinhardt, the murder of the Jews of Poland. There were to be 3 major death camps in eastern Poland at Bożec, Sobibor and Treblinka. Later, the staff of the T4 program were to make up the staff of these death camps. The death camp at Chełmno nad Nerem in what is today central Poland began murdering people by gas fans only 4 days before Hitler's announcement to his cronies that the Holocaust was taking place. Paul Goebbels said at his trial that he'd received a gas fan in the autumn of 1941 when he was in Ukraine. Construction of the camp at Bożec appears to have started around this time. However, its murderous operation did not start yet, not until March 1942. It seems that while the T4 men were waiting for the deportations to the death camps to begin, some were sent on a mission to occupy Minsk, which remains mysterious to this day. In charge of this mission was none other than Victor Brack, the person who had organised the T4 killings. Officially, the Osteinsatz, the Eastern Action as it was called, was to assist with the medical care and evacuation of wounded soldiers from the Eastern Front. The Osteinsatz was coordinated by Organisation Tod, an organisation responsible for engineering and construction projects. Brack and a contingent of T4 men were sent to Minsk in January 1942 on the Osteinsatz. At the beginning of December 1941, there had been a Soviet counterattack in front of Moscow which broadened out into large sections of the Eastern Front. The German line collapsed, and with it, the supply and service infrastructure including medical assistance. However, Minsk was well behind the line, and there was no likelihood of it being taken by the Red Army. Any wounded soldiers who had made it that far back were clearly capable of receiving assistance. Paulina Kneisler, a nurse who had been deployed as an assistant in the T4 murder program, admitted to a friend after the war that she'd been sent there to kill wounded German soldiers. I've done a separate video on Kneisler. Again, there's a link below. I think it seems highly likely that the whole point of sending these people from the T4 program to the Eastern Front was to kill wounded German soldiers. The means of killing them was with a lethal injection. At least 40 people from the staff of Hadamar were deployed in the Osteinsatz. The mysterious Osteinsatz program ended in April 1942. A number of men from it were reassigned to Aktion Reinhardt. It needs to be pointed out that only a minority of those in the Osteinsatz who had come from the so-called euthanasia program ended up in the death camps. Paulina Kneisler, for example, was not sent to a death camp as such, but to clinics where the physically and mentally challenged were murdered. If the purpose of the Osteinsatz was to evacuate the wounded, then it seems a bit odd to send trained killers to do it, staff from institutions that had claimed at least 75,000 lives. Irmfried Ebel was the future commandant at Treblinka. He had been in charge of the Bernburg T4 murder facility. Whilst there, he recruited Otto Stady, a nurse, to go with him to Minsk. Stady later went with Ebel to Treblinka. Werner Dubois was also at Bernburg. He was later at Beausitz and Sobibor. Heinrich Gley had been posted at Grafeneck and Pirna after Minsk. He went to Beausitz, Poniatowa, Travniki and Majdanek. Heinrich Arthur Mattis had been at Pirna before the T4 killings started. He'd served in the Wehrmacht in the Polish and French campaigns. He was discharged from the army in September 1941 and joined the Osteinsatz. Later he was sent to Treblinka and Sobibor. Willi Grossmuth was at Pirna before going to Minsk, then went back to Pirna, then to Travniki and then to Treblinka. Franz Herdl worked at Hartheim. From there he joined the Osteinsatz, and from there he was posted to Lublin. For a while he was the driver of Franz Stangl, later he was at Sobibor. Karl Schluck was at Grafeneck and Hadamar before going to Minsk. Later he was at Beausitz, Poniatowa and Majdanek. Heinrich Overhaus was at Grafeneck and Hadamar before going to Minsk. Later he was at Beausitz and Sobibor. Ernst Zirker was at Grafeneck, Hadamar and Pirna, then to Minsk, then to Beausitz and Sobibor. These are just a few examples. I could possibly go on and on and on. However, I think I've made the point that people who were sent to the Osteinsatz were people who later went on to mass murder Jews in Poland. Odilo Globocnik was in charge of the Operation Reinhardt murder camps in Lublin. Victor Brack wrote to Himmler on the 23rd of June 1942, "In accordance with my orders from Reichsleiter Buller, I have long ago put at Brigadier Führer Globocnik's disposal part of my manpower in order to aid him in carrying out his special mission. Upon his renewed request, I have now transferred to him additional personnel." We do not have hard-written proof that wounded German soldiers were murdered in the Osteinsatz. Maybe the Osteinsatz was just part of the construction worker organisation taught. There are no lists of the dead or people who were selected for what the Nazis termed special treatment. We do not know even where these killings took place exactly, if they took place. However, in my opinion, given that we know that around 5,000 World War I veterans were murdered in the T4 campaign, there was nothing to stop the Nazis murdering the injured from World War II either. Circumstantial evidence strongly points to these killers having been sent to the east in order to kill, and here their victims were the very people who had gone to the Eastern Front to fight in Hitler's war. I hope you found that interesting. I upload every Friday at 2000 hours, and now I'd suggest you had a look at my video on how Hitler announced to his cronies that the Holocaust was about to take place.